I do remember vividly an experience I had when I was 11 years old. And that experience shaped the rest of my life. My elder brother entered me in my school's tennis tournament. This is back in Wales, where I was raised. Now, I'd never played tennis in my life before that. But I found myself in the final playing against someone that I remember as the school hormone freak. Because this is a 13-year-old, he's already 6 foot tall, he's got facial hair, he's captain of our school rugby team. This is our school jock. And we start playing, and I'm just putting one foot in front of the other, doing the best I can. And after an hour, I find myself 6'4", 4-love in the lead. And this voice started talking to me. It was a voice in my head. And it said, Alan, you've already won 10 games. You only have to win 2 more and you're going to be the school champion. And I froze. I never won another game. And instead of focusing on the ball, I now focused on this conversation going on in my head. And the harder I tried, the worse I got. And the worse I got, the harder I tried. I knew what to do. I would never have got in the lead if I didn't know what to do. But I couldn't do what I knew. And that experience set me off on a journey to try and understand what was it that was going on inside me and how do I deal with it? Because I quickly realized that voice showed up everywhere in my life. And I've now come to believe that the biggest obstacle to performance isn't knowing what to do. It's doing what we know. It's taking action on things that we already know about. And not doing what we know shows up everywhere in our lives. How many of you, before you came here today, already knew of one thing that if you were to do a little more of it or a little less of it, you would be more effective? So obviously it's not a knowledge issue for you. It's you know what you need to do, but you're not taking action on it. And this, sometimes I think it's an obsession that we have. We get caught up in this illusion that there's some piece of knowledge that if I can just get my hands on that knowledge, then I'm going to be able to get at my greatness. I'm going to have a breakthrough in what I do. And yet there's so much knowledge that we already possess that we're not taking action on. So I've come to think about it this way, that there's, if we think of a wheel of performance or a wheel of greatness, and we make knowledge the rim of that wheel, then what we tend to do by habit or by education is we look to increase the thickness of the rim of that wheel when we try to be better. Sometimes we can make it so thick, the wheel gets so heavy it won't even turn. We get lost and bogged down in that knowledge. And if knowledge was all it took, we'd all read the book and we'd all be world champions at whatever we wanted to be. There has to be some other components. And to me, there are 3 other critical components. And I call them faith, and fire, and focus. Faith is what you believe about yourself and your abilities. Fire is all about energy, passion, and commitment. And focus is about what we pay attention to. And these all influence each other. Because what we focus on is what creates our beliefs. And a lot of that happens in our early years. And once we have a belief, that directs and filters what we focus on. And if you can get those pointed in the right direction, it will raise the fire and it'll make learning and using knowledge much easier. And if we get them pointed in the wrong direction, well, it'll lower fire or make learning and using knowledge much more difficult. So what then stops us from doing what we know, from using this knowledge that we have? I call it interference, mental interference, and I think about it this way, that our greatness equals our focus, plus our faith, plus our fire, plus the knowledge we have, minus this interference. And this mental interference is that internal dialogue that goes on in our minds constantly. It's what was going on in me on the tennis court, saying I only needed to win 2 more games and I would be the champion. So what can we do to access this greatness that we have in us? Well, I believe it's there in what we already know. Earlier I said focus drives everything that we do. So here's a blinding glimpse of the obvious. We're always focused on something. You know, if you read a good book, if you get lost in a good book or a good movie, you're focused. Or a good video game, you're focused. The key is, do we focus on the interference or do we focus on what's actually happening, on the present? See, when you play your sports well one day and poorly the next, or when you play your musical instrument well one day and poorly the next, it's not a knowledge issue. The knowledge hasn't changed. It's a focus issue. When our kids are smart enough to get good grades but don't, or when they do their chores one day and not the next, that's not a knowledge issue. That's a focus issue. What we focus on creates our beliefs, and what we believe ignites our fire. So I'd invite you to think about a couple of questions when you're playing, when you're investigating, accessing your greatness or trying to help somebody else get at theirs. First of all, is it really a knowledge issue, or could it be a faith, fire, and focus issue that they're wrestling with? And secondly, in the way you go about trying to access your greatness, do you create interference or do you reduce it?